Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second to last HRL recap for the MegaMix series season. Of course, it's going to be the second to last one because we're still going to have one recapping the grand final after this one. So that one will be entirely dedicated to the grand final. This one is entirely dedicated to specifically the last week of the regular season, and then also going over the regular season as a whole, going through everybody's finishing positions, and also taking a look at the specific like side series and stuff like that. Like, for example, like the Oval Championship, GP, SX, whatever. Yeah. So everything that encapsulates the entire regular season, we're going to take a look at that, go over that. In this one, also going to talk about the grand finals and the reveals again at the end of this one. I'm going to reveal the final track for the grand final lineup at the end of this one, so that's how I'm going to do the reveal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about future past this as well. So there's going to be a lot in this one. Let's get into it. Yeah, there's going to be quite a bit. So going into the final night, Hogabilis, heat races, Detail and Hunter taking the wins in those heat races. Obviously, interesting that, for the champ fight, Detail and I ended up in the same heat for this one. And Hunter, his heat win, pretty huge as well, because Hunter needed a lot of points or needed a win with his situation going into this. So, pretty interesting start to the night already just from the heat races alone going into Moto 1. We go into Moto 1. Actually, a little bit of back and forth between Hunter and Detail early on. Detail ends up taking the lead from Hunter. I eventually end up getting by Hunter. And Hunter only falls back to 4th, to his credit, which is still pretty good start to the night for him. Slaunch has a good drive through the field. Detail, once he took the lead, didn't really look back. Took the win in this Moto 1. Very strong performance here. I ended up taking 2nd. And yeah, Slaunch taking that 3rd place podium. Good drive from him from where he started. Yeah, pretty solid. And honestly, Hunter holding on to 4th was, again, like really good as well. And then Camby coming up with the top 5. Taking 5th there. Then we go into Moto 2. And Moto 2, obviously, with the invert, going to be a lot different than Moto 1. Moto 1 had some action and some battling, but was pretty clean for the most part. Moto 2, a lot more chaos to be had for sure in Moto 2. But yeah, so a lot of moves being made all over the place early on in this Moto. A lot more like Rex and stuff like that. Joker strategy coming into play as well. I think a lot more like varied Joker strategies in Moto 2. But in the end, Detail did end up taking the win for this one as well. I do think there was some potential for an interesting lead battle race here, but unfortunately I had a nosedive on the landing of the jump in the middle of the track, and I think that kind of took it away. And looking at the way the gap worked out, it's unfortunate that happened because I do think that this moto had the potential to be like the best lead battle, interesting moto in the night for sure. So yeah, that was unfortunate. That ended up happening, and then once that happened, Detail ended up taking the win pretty comfortably. He had a good Joker strategy on this one. I think that definitely helped him out a lot. Good pace as well, but the way he timed the Joker, I pointed out in the video as well, is pretty much perfect. And that led him to end up taking the win in this one, and that wraps up the championship as well. Like I said, it was like 2 out of 3. So taking those first 2 wins. Moto 3 at this point, as far as the champ battle went, didn't really matter. If I took the win in Moto 3, it would have just been for some extra points. Wouldn't have made too much of a difference. So yeah, so Detail clutches up in those first 2 races, locks it in, takes the championship in Moto 2. I end up taking 2nd, which was a pretty crazy race for 2nd, to be honest. My race through the field was pretty nuts in this one after the nosedive happened. I honestly don't even know how I got back to 2nd. So that was pretty crazy. Soul with a very strong 3rd here as well. And then Roman 4th. That was a big finish for Roman. And 5th for Slaunch. Another good finish on the board for him too. So now we go into Moto 3. In Moto 3, the question in Moto 3 now that the championship was wrapped up was going to be between that battle of Roman, Hunter, and Opix. And if you take a look at the results, Opix, not too great of a start to the night. Roman with like a decent start, good enough for what Roman needed to do. Hunter with a great start, but then Moto 2 was not great. Moto 2 is not great for Hunter. So yeah, this that set it up for an interesting Moto 3 where Hunter was in, like, realistically, like a must-win situation, Roman was in a, just have another solid race situation. And then Opix was in a, you're still probably good, but it's a little scary because of how those first 2 motos went. So Opix was in a try to get around the top 5 situation. And how did the race end up playing out? Well, Detail took another solid moto win here. This one was probably, the way this race worked out, this one was probably maybe the least close of all of them, I would say. It looked close for a little bit, but once the Joker strategies played out, then it ended up not being that close. So he took a strong win here. I went rogue. There's a good highlight. Trying to get by Slaunch, just going for the win because, this is kind of whatever at this point. So that's a funny part of this Moto 3. If you watch the video back, it was a pretty good moment. Hunter with a crazy performance. I thought the first Moto 4th place was already really good. Takes 2nd in Moto 3, but unfortunately, we'll take a look in a moment. Unfortunately, he needed the win. Slaunch took another podium. Roman another solid 4th place, and Coop in the top 5 with a really good performance. He got better as the night went on. So shout out to Coop. I mean, this was probably one of his better race, probably his best race on the season, honestly. So shout out to Coop for that. And then I gotta mention, Opix did get that 6th place. He didn't improve his score with the first 2 motos, but that 6th place was good enough to improve his score. And you'll see when we take a look at the points that was actually pretty important. He really clutched up in this last moto. So you'll see how it worked out. I gotta say though, shout out to the champ battle. I think if that nosedive didn't happen in Moto 2, I'm not saying I would have won, but I think it would have been spicier, and I think it would have been a more interesting conclusion. But unfortunately, because of that, it ended up being, not too crazy. But I gotta say, the wildcard guys, top 6 and point battle guys, they really clutched up in making for an interesting situation for those points going into this last race. Like, they all, the way that it played out, made it really spicy, and it was actually really fun to watch play out. So going through the overall points, as we wrap it up here, Detail, of course, sweeping the night, 51 points, going to take the overall win. Slaunch 2nd with 40. I still somehow ended up getting 3rd with 37. Tiebreaker over Roman, 4th with 37 as well. Hunter 5th with 35. Soul 6th with 34. 7th Camby with 32. Coop 8th with 28. Opix 9th with 28 as well. Elite 10th with 24. Armada 11th with 20. So now we got some stuff to look at. So let's go through everything. So let's start from the top. So Detail, of course, taking the championship. Clutch performance in the last couple weeks of the season. And, good season overall, or great season overall. 16 moto wins is huge. And, I think I had the consistency on the season, but he had those wins, and those wins made a big difference and ended up being pretty important for him. That being said, even if I traded a couple more wins, I think he still would have had it, but it would have been pretty close. And I do think that those wins did make a big difference. I mean, you got to think the win, you get a bonus point. He had 5 more wins. That does add up and get you a bit more of an advantage there. So yeah, those moto wins were huge, and especially like late in the season as well. So congrats to him on winning the championship. It's a good run, good battle. Ended up taking 2nd with a really consistent season, but yeah, couldn't get as many wins. And like I said, I think that wasn't necessarily the difference, but definitely made a difference in this battle. And then Slaunch with 3rd. He was very solidly in 3rd. Nobody could touch him in 3rd. 3 overall wins. Got to give him credit for that. 9 overall podiums, 5 moto wins as well. Like, this was a pretty underrated, good season out of Slaunch. Actually, he was really solid, especially at the start. Started off really hot. Soul comfortably in 4th. Now, that being said, I do think if Roman could have made the whole season, I think him and Soul would have had a bit of a battle. But still, don't want to take anything away from Soul. I genuinely think this was Soul's best season as a racer yet. I think he might have had another win or two in some different seasons, but in terms of just pure consistency, solid pace, clean driving, but still just being fast and being aggressive, I think he found a really good balance of it this season, and I honestly think he could have stolen another moto win or two than what he got. So I think it was a really impressive season out of Soul. I think it was really solid, well-deserved 4th place. And then here we go. We're getting into the conclusion of that interesting top 6 battle. And as you can see, Roman did do good enough in that last race to move all the way up to 5th, although it was pretty close, 284 points. You see Opix got 6th with 279, and Hunter 7th with 277. It was a 2-point gap. 2-point gap. Yeah, if Hunter got that win, that would have gave him some more points. That would have also gave him the wild card advantage too, and then there would have been some weird tiebreakers there. But yeah, so that win would have really clutched up for Hunter. Or if he somehow could have done a bit better in Moto 2 and still had that really good Moto 3, you know, the potential was there. It actually ended up being really close in the end. Opix, gotta say though, that 6th place was what he needed. It was really close. It ended up being really close, but that 6th place was what he needed, and he did improve his points at the end. He clutched up when it mattered. It got a little hairy, but he did make it happen. So, wow, great points battle between Opix and Hunter. I can't believe Hunter made it as close as he did at the end. It looked like it was pretty over, but, I mean, he did a great job, and then Opix clutched up, and of course, Roman did what he needed to do. Yeah, 7-point gap, Roman to Hunter, so that's really exciting. Now, that being said, we'll get to this in a moment, too. Does not mean Hunter's season is over, even though he didn't qualify for the Grand Finals. We'll get to that. But yeah, Roman, Opix, they take those last 2 qualifying positions. Hunter, that sad 7th place, but still a very good season and a very good effort from Hunter, I gotta say, especially on that final night. Camby, 8th with 231. A pretty decent season out of Camby, just could not get any wildcard points on the board, which is what Camby needed, so unfortunate. Armada just couldn't get one more wildcard point on the board. Armada actually did what he needed to do in points to potentially get a wildcard spot, and he had one wildcard point, but unfortunately just couldn't get that one extra one. Very, very unfortunate for Armada. But still had that a couple good top 5 performances, and or a few good top 5 performances in that one Hogtona moto. Taking another moto at Hogtona for whatever reason. It's just consistent. Good track for him. And then we get to our first wildcard runner, Elite, in 10th, 192 points. And he had that great Hogtona, and that great Hogtona carried him all the way to the grand final. Crazy how that works out. So congrats to Elite getting that first of the wildcard spots. Fireball with a solid season when he was able to show up, but unfortunately wasn't able to show up at the end. I think he could have made things spicy. Tough for him. Coop getting a few of those spots in the point position at the end. And getting his first top 5 in the final night, so that was pretty cool for Coop. And then Real Deal, our second wildcard racer. He had 3 wildcard points. When he was able to show up, he did a good job of locking in those wildcard points. I think he knew he wasn't going to make as many races on the season to make it in the top 6. Although if he was able to race consistently, I do think he would have been able to make it into the top 6 pretty easily. But I think he knew he wasn't going to be able to make enough, so he focused on getting those wildcard points, locking those in. He did a good job at that. Got a moto win, even as well, a couple overall podiums when he did show up, and got his wild card spot into the grand final. And you know, even though he didn't show up to as many races, as far as like just pure pace goes, I definitely think he deserves the spot. And we'll have to see what he's able to do when we get to it. Vulcan actually ran really well when he showed up, and it's unfortunate that Vulcan wasn't able to show up more consistently, because if you take a look at his averages, you know, we'll have to see. Maybe Vulcan only showed up to better nights. You know, maybe it would have balanced out if he did show up to more races, but you never know. And it's unfortunate. Again, Vulcan and Fireball in particular, I'm really sad that they weren't able to make more races, because I do think that top 6 and the wild card battle as well, I think those all would have been far more interesting if they were, well, I suppose Real Deal as well, if you want to throw him into that, because he probably would have made the top 6, and then that, you know, forces somebody out and moves the wild card battle around. Yeah, unfortunate that Real Deal, Fireball, and Vulcan weren't able to make more races, because I think they had the pace to make the I think they all had the pace to make the grand finals, and to make things even more spicy than they were. So that being said, when he did show up, I got to give credit where credit's due. Vulcan actually had some really good performances. 3 podiums, 6 top 5s in only 10 starts. I don't think he could be too upset with that. That's really good, solid stats out of Vulcan there. So good performances out of him for when he showed up. Soar showing up to a few races in the season. Top finishing rookie, I believe. Shout out to Soar with that. Uncle Blake, of course, making a few of those early races, having some good top 5s. Turkey getting that 1 podium on the season. There you go, Turkey. Matt showing up for a few of those early rounds, and bowing out after that. Silver, I think, just showed up for the Hogtona race, and then Atlantic showed up for a late race, did not make it to the last one. All right, sorry, I wanted to take a little break there to catch my breath, get some water and reset. And I also messed up the order of things I wanted to talk about. So before I get into like grand final stuff and everything, let's take a look at all these like side championships. So now that they're all confirmed, guaranteed, wrapped up, Goose points. Detail took the championship for this, although I got to give myself credit. I made it a little closer than I thought it'd be, with good consistency. But yeah, Detail definitely ran this one plenty of wins. And then you had Slanch and I mostly competing for the other wins. Soul and Real Deal taking a couple there too. But yeah, Detail just good wins, great consistency. 230 points, very earned host Goose title. I ended up taking second with 220. Slanch third with 203. Soul fourth with 181, and Hunter fifth with 155. Opix was really close behind in sixth. So those are the top five. You can see the rest of the results there too. I'll go through the top five in all of them. I'm not going to go through literally all of them for all these. It's going to be too much. And then the Hog points, Hog Whisperer title. Yeah, Detail actually made it really close in the end with that sweep. So I don't know how the mulligans would have worked out. Like if I would have got some third places instead of some second places in those first couple motos, if he could have ended up taking the Hog Whisperer title in the end here, I'm not sure how that would have worked out. But yeah, obviously I had a big advantage going into it. But to give him credit, he actually made it very interesting. And with the problem here was my mulligan races. I had worse mulligan races, right? You take a look, Hogtona Moto 2, Hogabilis Moto 3. For the most part, when I was finishing, well, not for the most part, literally when I was finishing in the podium, I was finishing first or second. But those races where I was outside of the podium, I had some rough ones, and Details were a little bit better on those. So yeah, you see Detail actually had the advantage without the mulligans. So I got off to a really hot start, but he really brought it back and made it a close Hog title. So yeah, the Goose points, I gotta give credit to both of us. They both ended up being pretty close. And probably closer than both of us would have expected, honestly. And yeah, 3-point gap. I ended up just barely taking it, but yeah, it was a good fight. And yeah, really great battle for the Hog points. Realistically, he just went on a insane run at the end. He won the last 5 Hog races in a row. So I mean, that was just a huge run from him to bring it back and make it interesting. So yeah. Made things really spicy. So I ended up taking the win though. Detail second with 159. I had 162. Slanch third with 141. Not too far off. Did a good job. Roman fourth with 130. Roman was actually kind of underrated in the Hog races. And then Soul fifth with 125. Now we're going to go through these probably a little bit quicker. GP/GK title. Detail, of course, we went over this one earlier, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. Because this got wrapped up way early in the season. Detail took this one, 82 points. Second was myself, 79. Slanch third, 74. Roman fourth, 68. Fireball actually fifth with 63. Then the oval points, we talked about this as well. I ended up taking this one, 132. Slanch took second with 114. Detail third with 112. Soul fourth with 111. Hunter fifth with 97. And then SX, MX, we discussed this as well. Detail 102. Myself second, 92. Slanch third with 89. Fourth, Opix 72. Soul fifth with 67. And a tie there with Roman as well. And then the rally points, we'll take a little bit more time with this one because this one obviously wasn't determined until after this last race. But of course, Detail going to be taking this one. 102 points. I took second with 94. Soul third. Wow. Soul on the podium for the rally races. I gotta give credit mostly because his TRS night. His TRS night, I've pointed it out before, was actually fantastic. That was one of Soul's like most underrated performances on the season. His TRS night was phenomenal. But yeah, Soul, well-earned podium in the rally title. Third, 81 points. Roman, fourth with 76. This was Slanch's worst category with 72. So interesting thing there. Although he did bring it back. To give him credit, he brought it back. Hogabilis was pretty good for him. But the TRS night was not so good for him. And the Reach RX also kind of went downhill as well. So yeah, that's how it goes. Everybody has their upsides and downsides with these, right? But still in the top 5. Still in the top 5 as well. So that wraps up all of those side championships and whatnot. So now, before I start discussing, like, give one more look at the point standings there. before I start discussing like potential for the grand finals and you know what everybody needs to do, let's take a look at the season as a whole real quick, and then sort out the grand finals layout. So quick recap of the whole season. Elite taking that first overall. This is a huge performance for him that led him all the way to the grand finals. And then Detail taking that next one. One of the craziest race nights, probably still the craziest race night on the season, I would say. And then Slaunch really gets into a groove, comes in hot, has a great 2-week span here. And then I get my first overall on the board with a solid tier S night. And then Slaunch and Detail, they end up getting a couple there too. And then I have a good span here with Barvo and Firestone Firehawk, a little bit of both in this night. And then Detail gets back on the board, brings it back with a really strong 4 races in a row. And then I have another good 4-race night in the Woo night. And then Detail ends it off strong again, 5 in a row. So just, you know, back and forth streaking there. When Detail was on, he was on. You see a lot of his wins came in pairs and in streaks this season, whereas I was more consistent throughout. I would say, like getting wins here and there. And then Slaunch had some really good nights, but especially like right here, this span of the season, he was on it. He was on it. He was very good. If you accounted for like mulligans, it was really early for that. But if you counted for mulligans, I mean, he'd be up there like in the champ fight early on. It wasn't until later in the season where he started to drop back a little bit, but he was still really strong. And then some important, you know, other underdog performances. Hunter getting the top 3 overall there. Fireball getting a top 3 overall here. Soul getting a couple. Real Deal getting some on the board. Getting his moto win. As you can see, myself, Detail, and Slaunch won most of the motos, but Armada got one here. Real Deal got one here. And then Soul got one here. Yeah, so not that many upset wins. Not that many upset wins in the season. So when they came, they were pretty important for those drivers when they did happen. Oh, and then can't forget there was the multi-class race. Easy to forget, but that preseason event happened. I ended up taking that one. Then Detail and Slaunch for the podium. That was a really cool event that maybe we'll have to mess around with more. Okay, so you have a look, now that we went through all that, you have a look at the grand finals tracks that we've announced so far. We've got Skellige, we've got Quebec, we've got Sonoran, we've got Pocono, we've got Lafayette. Skellige and Sonoran can be found on Details files. Quebec and Lafayette are both on my files, and Pocono is on Opix's files. So, last track to announce for the grand finals, just going to gun it. It's going to be Haguna Seika. We're going to be running Haguna Seika back, racing that again. So that'll be the final announced track. The order of the grand finals races, we might swap it around a little bit. We'll see. I'll update you guys on that. I'm sure it'll probably get shifted around a little bit. Of course, the ovals like back-to-back 4th and 5th, like yeah, they'll probably get moved around a bit. But that rounds out the lineup. Haguna Seika will be the final announced track. Although I do want to say I got a good idea recently to switch in a different track for one of the already announced tracks that could give us a little more variety and give us another new track, but still fit with where the other, still fit with the category of the track that it's replacing, kind of. You'll see what I mean. So if I do, I haven't decided on it yet, but if I do end up making that decision, I'll announce it in the Discord. So one of the tracks, only one, might get swapped around. Got a late idea that I think might be pretty good. So I'll update you guys if that happens. But as of right now, this is the track order. And again, one more time, Haguna Seika is the final announced track. So now that you have the grand finals layout, let's go through and preview it real quick. And then I'm going to be getting out of here for this recap because my voice is starting to get tired. So going through all the drivers, like their keys. Detail, I think doing well in the ovals. I think that was his weak point in the season. If he could do well in the ovals, he'll be set pretty well. For myself, I would say take one of those goose wins would be huge. And I've got to be on point like I was in the beginning of the season in the hog races. I think if I could do that, then I'll have a chance. Slaunch, just catch fire, do good in the supercross, do a bit better in the terrain race. And then Slaunch, he can low-key be pretty good at the ovals. So if he can get a supercross or get a terrain, like if he could steal one of those, and then do well on the ovals, which he can do. I think he actually has a path to doing well and to winning here as well. And then Sol, try to keep that consistency that he's had throughout the season. Roman, I think Roman needs to get a win on the board. A moto win on the board would be huge for him. Opix, just continue doing what you're doing, especially for the Supercross race. If he could have another like great Supercross race, if he could have a good like terrain performance, and if he could be good on the ovals, then he could have a good night. Elite's gonna be the super like underdog. You know, we'll see what he can do. But the hog races, he did do really good at the hogs at a time, and he's fallen back in those a bit recently. If he could get back to that hog performance, I think he could finish decently. And then finally, Real Deal. I think Real Deal could be a contender, but actually similar story for him as Elite. I'd say Real Deal needs to clean up those hog performances, and I think he knows that as well. That's his clear weakness in the grand final. He'll be good in the goose races, good enough to compete, but it's not going to matter if his hog performances don't pick up. So that's what he's going to need to do. So that was a quick run through for everybody, what they're going to need to do, focus on for the grand finals. But these are our contenders. Backup drivers are Hunter and Armada, and then it would be Fireball if he could do Saturday, I guess, would be like the third in line. Otherwise, it would be Camby would be the third in line. So just for those drivers that I just mentioned, there's a chance that a driver or two could not make the grand finals. So you guys should be like prepared and ready to go, because you could get thrown into it and have to race, or maybe even just have to do a couple motos until they show up. So yeah, again, Hunter, Camby, Armada, and Fireball, definitely be prepared for that possibility, because it is a real possibility. It could happen. So just be ready for that. Especially Hunter. Hunter's the first up, so especially Hunter, I would try to be prepared. One more final thing. Went through the poll. I'll do it right now. Went through the poll. We had some complications with doing the race on Friday this time and trying to figure out how it works for everybody. We are going to be moving it to Saturday, so it'll be a little bit different this week. No racing on Friday. Saturday, first day of June, that'll be our grand final. Yeah, so wanted to get that out there as well. I'll be posting that in the Discord too. Anything else? As far as like a quick like future tease, I do want to say that I've got a bunch of different ideas floating around for what to do afterwards. And I'm going to try to announce the next series and whereabouts of the time after the grand finals. So still working on that. There's still some ideas floating around. But that's the announcement for this one. God damn it. I realized I just did the announcement of an announcement. But conclusion of the grand finals. We'll have that figured out, where we're going next, and you know, somewhat timetable on that. Although, one thing I can announce for sure is that before we go into the next season, we will be doing a tournament. It's been a while since we've done a tournament, and I had a good idea. Well, we actually came up with this idea a while ago to do like a Blast from the Past style tournament with the recent track voting that Opix did way back in the beginning of the year. Take the top 8 from those and do like a Blast from the Past style tournament. And we're going to do exactly that the week before the next season starts. This will be somewhere in late June. Again, exact timetables, that'll come after the grand final. But again, next season, can't say quite yet, but I can announce that tournament, that huge tournament where it'll have those top 8 races, and I'll post a doc for it, and we'll have that all ready. Maybe I'll do its own video for that one. So yeah, a bunch of stuff to be excited about this weekend in this recap, and also for the season that we've done and how great it's been, and then also giving you guys a little bit of a tease for the future as well. So we just went through a shit ton right there. I just dropped a lot of bombs in this recap. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you're looking forward to the grand final. Don't miss it. And yeah, I need to regain, man. That was so much talking. Holy moly. GG's. And yeah, hopefully see you guys at the grand final this weekend. Later.